Hey folks, welcome to this tutorial which is going to teach you how to set up a working development environment on Windows. You may have seen my previous video which covered how to do it on Mac. This is going to do the exact same thing except it's just going to be on Windows. So over here on the left, I've got my app task queue, which is just showing all the things that we're going to do. If you take my course Programming for Musicians, C++ for Musicians, at the end of that, you get access to the 17-hour course, which breaks down how to actually make this thing from scratch. A little shameless plug there. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff that we're going to cover in this video to get a fully working development environment set up on Windows. The first thing we're going to do is install Visual Studio. Visual Studio is the it's the text editor, the compiler, the source code inspector thing. That's what we're going to use to write all of our code. Now we are also going to install Git Bash, and that is a command line tool that lets us create Git repositories and just do command line-y stuff it comes built in on Linux and OS X, and it's not there on Windows. So this is going to allow us to do that. Once we have that installed, we are going to use Git to clone the JUCE framework, and this is going to be our first exposure into using Git source control management. Once we have finished cloning the JUCE framework, we're going to build the ProJucer project, which is included with it. And then once we have finished building ProJucer, this is the way that we will create audio plugins, the way we are going to create desktop applications, stuff for Android or iOS. It's all through ProJucer. Once we do that, then we're going to make a Hello World project and we're going to build it. And then we will have completed we will have completed the basic, we're set up and we can make projects now. Once we get past that point, we're going to make a Git repository for our Hello World project, and we're going to create a local repository. We're going to create a remote repository, and then we're going to sync the two together. Now, the reason for this is so we want to have a history of all development that occurred for our on the project. So when we get further on, when we clone the JUCE framework, I will show you what I mean about this development history. Basically, what it lets you do is keep track of all the work that you've done, as well as if you ever need to go back or make changes to it, you can do this very easily and conveniently. And this is what gets used in a lot of professional working development environments. So we're going to experience that. So we're going to create a local repository. We're going to create a remote repository. We're going to make some commits of the code changes that we make. We're going to push those commits to the cloud or push them to the remote, however you want to think of it. Again, this is stuff that happens in the real world development environment. And then we're going to do those via the command line, via Git Bash, just because it's good to know how to do that. And sometimes it's faster to do stuff via command line than it is with some sort of GUI. And then we're actually going to install a Git GUI, and we're going to go through the process of making a branch that we're going to develop on. Then we're going to make some commits to this branch. We're going to do a pull request so we can merge those changes we made on that branch into our primary repository. And then we're going to perform that merge. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff to do. So let's get started. And we're going to do the first thing, which is to install Visual Studio. So the first way to do that is to just open up here, open up the browser. And full disclosure, I am running this in a virtual machine on my 2011 iMac. So if things take a while, as in keep an eye on the timestamp down here, and you'll see how long this stuff actually takes. It doesn't take this long on a dedicated machine, but I'm running this inside a virtual machine on my iMac. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is just look for Visual Studio. Visual Studio, like that. Now there's a couple different versions. There's the community version, there's the paid version, there's the version for Mac, that kind of thing. What we want is Visual Studio, and we want Visual Studio 2019. There are other versions out there, and it really depends on whether or not your computer can support it. So we're going to download the community version of 2019. This is the free version. All right, we're going to get rid of that. We are going to run this. Now, this is a blank operating system. The only thing I have installed on it is my app task queue, just so I could have this thing in the corner. Okay, and yes, we want to run this. All right, so we can start this installer right here. We can close this page. So we are on our way installing Visual Studio. All right, now we're up at this page where we want to see, we can pick what we're going to work on, and we are going to work on desktop development with C++. That's what the JUCE framework is written in. Okay, and when there's a couple things here that we need to have turned on. We do want these, this should actually be okay. If we need to install more stuff, we can always come back to this. So we're not doing any Visual Studio 2017 stuff. We're not doing any 2015 stuff. So this should just be fine for what we need. We don't need command line support yet or any of this stuff. Okay, so just click install. And it's going to take it a while to download and get everything going. So I will see you back in a moment when this has finished downloading. All right, Visual Studio has finished. And if we ever need to modify anything, we can just click the modify button right here in this installer. So we're just waiting for it to launch. Welcome. You're going to need to sign in. It's easy to create an account. It's free. So just, get yourself signed in with your with the account you created. All right, it's going to take just a couple moments for it to open up and launch. All right, cool. So this is Visual Studio has formally launched, so we can mark this and just leave it in the taskbar for right now. So we can check off that it's installed. Okay. Close that. Let's leave this pinned as well in case we need to modify it. All right, the next thing we need to do is install git bash, and we'll do the same thing we did before. We're just going to search for it and install it. Git bash Windows. All right, and here we go. Git downloads, that's what we want. And we want the Windows client. All right, so we'll just click run. And yes. All right, we can close this. Now, Git's main purpose is to keep track of development history of any software or text-based thing that you're working on. It can kind of work with binary files like images and stuff, but it doesn't do too well with that. So it's primarily meant for just keeping track of the way text files and stuff change. I'll show that process later on in this video. So let's go through this installer. We're going to click next. Sure, that's a fine default place for it to go. We do want to have git bash here added to the right-click menu. All this other stuff is fine. The default settings here are just perfectly okay. So we can click next. This can go right into, yeah, all this default stuff is totally fine. Let's see, what text editor do we want to use? We don't have any of these installed, so we'll just use, we'll just use Vim for right now. Use the Nano editor by default or the Vim as did. So we'll just leave that alone because later on we're going to install fork. So this is fine. All right, so we're going to do git from the command line and whatnot. All right, so click next. Use OpenSSL, that's totally fine as well. Check out Windows style. Yes, basically all these default options are perfectly fine. Also, again here, this is also fine. All right, and next. And we can leave that unchecked. And we'll just wait for this to install. All right, cool. That has finished installing. Excellent. So we'll click finish, and it's all good to go. All right, we can check that we have installed git bash here. Yeah, go ahead and open this. It's just going to show the home page. We have installed git bash. All right, cool. So we don't need to look at this. Okay, so install git bash. That is done. Now we need to clone the JUCE framework. Now for this, I'm going to make a folder on the desktop called programming. And this is where I'm going to put all of this stuff. So programming, like that. And now to clone the JUCE framework, first we have to go get the JUCE framework. So I'm just going to search for JUCE GitHub. And GitHub is an online repository. It's like one of these cloud services where you can store your code or any other type of stuff that's related to some Git repository. Okay, so this is where we're going to go right here. And this is basically the project. These are all the commits. These are the 2 branches that's going on. You can look inside here and you can see all of the source code that's involved with the JUCE and whatnot. All of this type of stuff. So as a very, very basic overview of source control stuff, basically what happens is you write some code, you make some changes to it, and you push those changes, and they kind of get stored like this. Like, here's an example of code that was added to a previous version. And it's easy to look at, like, you know, what version came before it, that sort of thing. Let's see, let me go back here. We'll just do a quick example of this. So we'll look at, we'll go back to the commits, and we'll look at a different commit, like this commit right here. Bump version, this one, OpenGL update native context. So this is an example where they added these 2 lines of code right here, and for whatever reason, it solved this bug that some user had discovered. Okay, so this is an example of they were able to store the history of this change at this point in time in the repository. So if they ever needed to go back to before this line of code was added, they're able to do that, which is a feature that as a developer, you really want to have that capability. Okay, so we've got to clone this. So let's go to our desktop. Let me shrink this window a little bit. All right, let me open this. I am going to right click, git bash here. And now we are going to do some cloning. So we're going to grab this repository. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to type git clone like that, and then paste it. Oh, you type the right letters, Control V. Oh, I'll just type it in by hand. Again, I'm primarily a Mac user, so the Mac shortcuts don't work for copying and pasting. So https://github.com/we-roli juice.git. All right, this is going to clone here. So you can see inside it's cloning everything. It's going to take a moment for it to download all of the parts, all of the file history for all this stuff. And then it's going to get the repository set up, and we'll be able to see all of the code. It's got to resolve all of these deltas. Okay, cool. So we can see that there's a lot of stuff that has just appeared. All right, awesome. So this is the JUCE framework now on our computer locally. Now, the next thing we need to do is switch to the develop branch. If you look here, you can see there's 2 branches. And the develop branch is ahead of the master branch by a considerable amount of development. So we need to switch to it so we have the most recent version of the framework. And we can do that by doing, first right now we're in the desktop programming folder, and we need to go inside the JUCE folder. So we need to do cd./JUCE. Okay, and now we can do git checkout develop. That's the name of the branch that we're going to switch to. All right, now we are on the development branch. So we have cloned the JUCE framework, and now we get to build ProJucer. So navigate to Extras, ProJucer, Builds, Visual Studio 2019. And now we're going to open up this. And I want to be able to see the file extension, so I'm going to look for folder options. We're going to turn that on. So under View, always show hidden files. Don't hide the extensions, that sort of thing. I think that's all of it. I think that's all that I need to do. All right, cool. So SLN is what we want, so that's good. Okay, close that. Let's open this in Visual Studio. Okay, so once you have it open, go over here to the left, and we have to make one line of code change. So we're going to, in this Solution Explorer, which if you cannot see, you can just find it over here under the View menu. Solution Explorer, you're going to go to JUCE Library Code. You're going to click on App Config. And then we're going to change this line right here JUCE enable GPL mode. We're going to change it from 0 to 1. Now the reason for this is because if we didn't do this, we would need to sign up for a JUCE Indie or Pro license. Otherwise, JUCE is going to show a splash screen and whatnot. And we don't want that. So the only requirement is that we release our project's source code and make it fully open source. That's the only requirement to do. That's the only requirement to conform with GPL mode. So once you've done that, save it, and now we can build it. So build solution, and this is going to take a little bit of time for it to build everything. All right, build succeeded. So that's what we're always looking for. Build succeeded. Okay, cool. So we are now done with Visual Studio for right now. So let's close this. And we can check off that we built ProJucer. Now the main purpose of ProJucer is to create projects and to set up projects. So if we wanted to make a plugin for Pro Tools or Logic or Ableton or Reaper, this is the way we would use it. We would use ProJucer and spawn a plugin project. Okay, so we are going to make a Hello World project. So navigate to the, if we go back to our builds folder for ProJucer, navigate to Visual Studio 2019 where the solution was, and go inside the X64 project, go into the debug, go into app, and now we're going to look for ProJucer. ProJucer.exe. All right, so just go ahead and run this. Okay, now we need to configure it a little bit. So let's do that first. Let's just click cancel. Let's get out of this analytics thing because we don't care about that for right now. And now we can do file, global paths, and we need to specify the path to the JUCE repository, the JUCE folder, and then the modules folder. So these are on the desktop for me. So I'm going to navigate to my desktop folder. I'm going to navigate to the JUCE folder specifically, which is inside programming for me. And I'm going to do the same thing for the JUCE modules, and I'm looking for that folder on my desktop, the JUCE folder, and then specifically the modules folder inside of that. Okay? And once you've done that, that's all you should need to set up. This is also where if we had AAX or any of this other stuff set up, this is where we would specify the locations of those things. Okay, so we can close this. Now, we're going to build this Hello World project, and it's going to be a GUI application. So click on that, and this is going to go into, let's see, I'm just going to put it right on the desktop inside programming, and I'm going to call it Hello World, like that. All right, and this is going to be Visual Studio 2019, and we're going to make sure that we have use global module path checked, otherwise it's going to look for here for the modules, and they don't exist here, they exist somewhere else. Okay, so click Create. And now we have our default Hello World project. So we can click this button right here to save and open in IDE. All right, we're just waiting for Visual Studio to finish opening up. Okay, cool. So as a quick introduction to what's going on here, in ProJucer, over here on the left side, we have the File Explorer, and we can see that that lines up with the source code that we see here on the left of Visual Studio. So we don't need to make any changes for right now. The only thing we're going to do is click the click this play button right here, or go to this debug menu and click Start Debugging. They're both going to do the same thing. All right, this is going to build the project, and then it's going to run it, and we're going to get to see our default Hello World application. All right, it's going to take a little minute to compile. But once it's done, we'll be able to take a look at our Hello World application. All right, done building project. That's cool. So it should be linking it now. Oh, there it goes. All right, excellent. This is our Hello World application. This is the default GUI app that you can make in JUCE. And then from here is where we would add a bunch of features and whatnot and make it do stuff and whatnot. All applications start out like this. Okay, great. So we can close this because we're all done with that. And we can close Visual Studio as well. Okay, so we have successfully built the Hello World project, so we can check that off. Now, we are going to create a Git repo for the Hello World project. And this we're going to do in the command line. So let's go over here to this guy, just so we can see what's going on. Go to the programming folder and go inside Hello World. So we're going to jump to that. We can do CD for change directory. And I'm just going to drag hello world in like this. And it's going to populate it with the full path. All right. So now I'm inside the hello world folder. And if I type ls, it's going to list everything like that. So I can see there's the builds folder, the juicer file, the juice library code, and the source code thing. All right, so we need to make a git ignore file. So we can do touch.git ignore like that. And now if we do ls, whoops, why didn't that create it? Well, either way, we need to create a git ignore file. So we need to go new text document, and we're going to call it git ignore, like that, and just put a period in front like that. Yes, change the file extension. Okay, cool. So we can open this with a text editor. Open with, Notepad is fine. Now, the whole reason behind this is that when you compile a file on Windows, a bunch of extra code is generated. Oh, I'm putting this in the wrong folder. This needs to go in there. Oh, there was a git ignore file in there. I don't know why I did that. Apologies for that. I was in the wrong folder when I created that git ignore file. Okay, so as I was saying, when you build a project, a bunch of stuff gets generated. So we can see we have all of these files which get generated. Then in this x64, in the builds folder, we have all of these other things that get generated. Now, we don't want to keep track of that stuff because every time we compile, they're all going to get changed, and we don't want to keep track of those changes. The only changes we want to keep track of are the changes that happen in our source code and the changes that happen in our juicer file. That's it. Whenever we make changes to the ProJucer project settings, or whenever we make changes to the actual code, those are the only things we want to keep track of. Because every time we resave in ProJucer, it's going to regenerate all of these files. It's going to regenerate all of these files right here. And then whenever we compile, it's going to regenerate or update all of these files. Whoops. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff that doesn't need to go in our repository. So that is why we are going to update this git ignore file. Yes, open it with Notepad. And we're going to make it ignore those two folders. And we will do that by writing */ builds and then */ juice library code. Right, and just save it and close it. Now we can create our Git repository. And we can do that by typing git init, like that. There's our Git repository. And now we can do git add period, like this. And if we do git status, we'll see that the only thing that it's adding to the repository is the git ignore file, the juicer file, and then the source code files. Now I want to show you what would happen if I didn't do the git repo and the git ignore file. If I didn't do the git ignore file. So check this out. I'm going to get rid of this. We're just going to delete this guy. I'm going to get rid of this git repository. And I'm going to do this. I'm going to do git init and then git add period. Okay, and now if I do git status, look at all these files that are going to be included in the repository. That's a lot of stuff. Let me expand this a little bit. All right, these are a lot of files, and it's just cluttering up the framework, or cluttering up the repository. Again, we only want to see this stuff in there. So let me get rid of this Git folder again, the Git repository, and recreate this. So I'm going to do touch.gitignore. There's my git ignore file. We're going to open it, */ builds, */ juice library code. And save it, close that. Now we do git init, git add period, git status. Okay? And now we can make our first commit, and this is going to create the default base of what the code looked like at the very beginning of the project. So we will do this by doing git commit -m, meaning for message, and then we're type initial commit. There we go. All right, cool. So we created our local repository. Let's check that off. And we made a commit. Let's make a change to the source code and make a commit of that just to show this whole process. So hello world.juicer, we're going to open this. Let's see, we want to do more apps and we are going to look for ProJucer, look for another app on this PC. That is going to be in desktop programming, JUCE, extras, ProJucer, builds, Visual Studio 2019, x64, debug, app, ProJucer. So we have to dig a little bit for it. It might be easier to move that to the desktop, but in case we make any other changes to ProJucer's source code, it's good to just leave it there for the next time we build it. Okay, this is going to open up. All right, so we've got ProJucer open. Let's open it in Visual Studio. And then we were going to make one change to the code and make a commit of that change. Okay, so open up main component.cpp here on the left. Again, if you cannot see the Solution Explorer, you're going to go to View Solution Explorer, like that. Now, we're going to change this text color from white to red, like that. So just change that to red. And you can tell that source code was changed because you get a little yellow thing over here. All right, so save that and run it, and we'll see some red text. Okay, great. The text is red, so that's fantastic. We can close this. We're all done there. All right, let's go back to the terminal, and we're going to make a commit. If we do git status, we'll be able to see that this guy, main component.cpp, was changed. And it's not staged for commit, so we need to stage it first, and we can do that by typing git add and then the name of this file, or we can just do git add period, and then that's going to add every file that has changes. So we'll just do git add period. And then if we do git status, we'll see that this is staged, ready to be committed. And so we can do git commit -m, and then we can say changed text color to red and enter. All right, cool. So now we can see that our we have committed the fact that we made this change. So we basically recorded the text edit that we recorded the steps we took of changing the text. So we're not actually recording, we're not actually resaving the file in a certain way. We're actually recording the step that this text was changed from, or this line of text was changed from g.setColor colors white to g.setColor colors red. That's actually what gets recorded in Git. So we're able to just undo all of these steps if we ever need to. It's really, really handy. Okay, so let's create, if we go back to task queue, let's create a remote repository now and then push these commits to the cloud. So I'm going to be using GitHub for this. If you do not have a GitHub account, you're going to sign up for one. If you do have a GitHub account, you're going to sign in. Okay. And the next thing you're going to do is click this plus button right here and create a new repository. And the name of your repository should be the same name as the project that we created. So hello world, like that. Now this is going to be a public repository to conform with that GPL mode that we created in ProJucer. We already have a git ignore file, so we are not going to add one. And we don't need a README file either. And we don't need a license because it's just a hello world project. So just click create repository. Okay. The next thing to do is push an existing repository from the command line. So this is the one that I'm going to do right here. And I'm just going to type this in, git remote add origin https:// the name, whatever shows up here. Okay, now what this is doing, a remote is a repository that is not on your computer, relative for this one. Okay, and we're adding it to this local repository and we're giving it the name origin. Okay, and then, so if I push enter here, it's going to create it. And now if I do git push, basically what it's going to do, it's going to push whatever changes are currently being done on the branch we're on, it's going to push those to whatever branch we have specified here. We're pushing to the origin, and we're specifically pushing to the master branch on the origin. If you remember when I had, if we go back over here, remember how I said there were two different branches? There was the develop branch and the master branch, and you can call branches whatever you want. This is where we specify what, where we're going to push to, and then which branch of that thing we're going to push to. So we're going to push to the master branch of the remote named origin. So git push -u origin master, like that. And it's probably going to prompt me for credentials because this is a fresh Windows install. Or not? Okay, cool. All right, so it didn't prompt me. And now if I refresh this page, I'm going to see my code. Look at this. There is my changed text color to red. Now, the cool thing about this is if I ever want to share my project with someone else and they want to see the commit history or whatever, they can just clone the repository and see all of the changes. So that's a reason that is super helpful. Okay, so we created we created a remote repository and we pushed those commits to the cloud. So that's awesome. Now, I'm done doing anything with this command line stuff because unless you know all of those commands by heart, it's really tedious to try to look them up and remember them. So I'm going to use a git GUI to do that. So I'm going to grab the app fork. Okay, so we're going to look for fork.dev is what we want to look for. Okay, and this is a fast and friendly Git client for Mac and Windows. All right, so we're going to download it for Windows. We're going to run it. All right, we just got to wait for it to run. And now we need to wait for it to install. All right, so let's leave it pinned here in the taskbar. So that way we can always get to it. Is this always pinned? Yes, let's pin ProJucer to the taskbar. Okay, cool. All right, so we need to fill in a little bit of information and just kind of set it up. Basically, whenever we make commits, this is going to supply the username of the commit and the email associated with that commit. So that way, if you have a couple people on your team, this is how you can keep track of who did what. Okay, so I'm just going to enter my name and my email. And I'm going to change the source code folder to be that folder that I have on my desktop. Programming, select folder, finish. All right, it's going to need a moment to get set up. Okay, so now we can see all of our different repositories. And this is what I meant about how you can see the entire history. If I open up the JUCE framework, the JUCE repository, if I go to all commits, let me expand this. You can see all of the code that they've done, all of the changes that they've made to the JUCE framework, all this stuff. So it's incredibly handy to be able to roll backwards and see all the changes that happened. So you can see here, like it's just one simple change that they made here. They just added a little bit of code. They basically replaced this line was replaced with this line right here. And then, you know, for this one, they did a lot more stuff. But basically, this is the whole history from where the project first began. You can go all the way down to the bottom. This is like the very, very first framework. It takes a minute for it to populate. But if you wanted to see the way, you know, this project evolved, that's how you would do it. So that's an example of basically being able to like revert to whatever you needed. Okay, so we can close this one and we're going to open our Hello World. Now that we have fork open, we are going to, we're going to make a branch, and in this process, we're going to do some graphical changes on the branch. So we're going to do create new branch, and we're just going to call this branch graphics update. All right, we're going to check it out after we create it. Okay, cool. So now any changes that we make to the code that we commit are going to show up on this graphics update branch. So let's do that now. Let's change the font size from 16 to 32. Whoops, 32. And let's change this color from red to green. Oops, green. All right, and let's run it and see how it looks. All right, we're just waiting for it to compile. Build succeeded. Okay, text is much larger. It's nice and green. All right, that works for me. So let's go to fork and let's make a commit of this. We'll go to our changes. We need to stage the change. We can see here that like it used to be 16, now it's 32, whatnot. So we stage these changes. Let's enter our commit subject and description. So changed text size, changed color to green, changed font color. All right, and commit one file. All right, and we can see here, here's our change, and you'll notice there's a branch here named graphics update, but if we go back to our repository, there's no branch here for that, just the default branch. So we can right click, graphics update, push to origin, and click push here, just push. We're pushing from graphics update, and we're creating on the remote named origin a branch called graphics update. So click push. Okay, now we can see that it's both here and here on origin graphics update. So let's refresh this. And we're gonna see two branches, graphics update, and we can see that it's one commit ahead of master. All right, let's do one more text change, and then we're going to, let's make our text be on the left. So let's see. What are our choices here? Show me the autocomplete. Centered. All right, we want centered left, okay? So we just made a change right here. Let's see how that looks. All right, we're just gonna build it and run it. All right, our text is on the left. It's nice and green, it's nice and large. Okay, cool, so we're done here. We finished doing that. We like the change. So let's make a commit of that. That should be here under changes. So we can stage this guy. We can say moved text to left side of screen. All right, and let's do a commit. All right, and let's do a push. Push graphics update to origin, because you'll see that it's one commit ahead of the origin. All right, so graphics, push. Okay, great. So now we can create a pull request. Let's go to task queue and check off that we made a branch and we made a request, made a commit, sorry. So we're going to make a pull request now, and pull requests are basically saying, hey, I've got some code on this other branch. Can you check it out? And if it's cool, can you merge it in back to the master branch or whatever branch you want it merged into? So we can right click on here. We can go to the origin and we can say, oh, there used to be a feature to create a pull request. So we have to do the pull request on GitHub directly. On the Mac version, you can create a pull request right from fork. Maybe there's an update. Let's see. All right. Looks like there was no update. Okay, let's go back to GitHub. Let's go to our branch. Okay. And now we can do we can do a compare and pull request. Okay, so just click on that button right there. And now it's able to be merged. There are no conflicts. So we can just say finished. We can make a note to whoever's going to review this. Finished graphics update. And create the pull request. Normally, you know, your boss or whatever is going to add a reviewer to it. Or you can assign your boss to be the reviewer of it if you're ready for them to look at it. Here are the commits that were done in it. Here's showing all the changes that were made. Okay, so click create pull request. All right, here's the pull request, and it says this branch has no conflicts with the base branch, so it can be merged automatically. So we are going to do that merge. Again, this is what happens in a real development environment. You know, your boss or whatever is, or your project manager is going to say, hey, can you implement this feature? And you say, sure, I got it. All right, let me go implement these graphic changes. And you take care of them, and then you say, hey, I'm done. Here's a pull request, and then they go review it. And if it's cool, because you got to remember there's like 4 or 5 people working on the code base at the same time, and you don't want to add code that causes a bunch of stuff on their work to break when your stuff gets merged in. So they're going to look at this, they're going to review it, they're going to go over all the commits and stuff and see the actual changes to the code and be like, hey, this is totally cool. It can be merged. There's stuff here that says whether or not it's cool or if there's going to be conflicts and whatnot. And then when it's good to go, just click merge pull request. Confirm merge. All right, cool. So then once the pull request is successfully merged, usually you will just close the branch on the remote. So this is going to delete it from the GitHub, but it's still on your local machine. So we'll click delete branch. All right. And now if we go back to fork and if we fetch, and we fetch all remotes and we prune the remote branches, we'll see this. All right. Remove remote branches that no longer exist. Fetch. And we can see here that origin master no longer, so we can see that origin graphics update no longer exists, but it exists on our local machine. And we can see here how we made this little branch. And then origin master is merged in. Okay, so that's our pull request and that's our merge. And now what we can do is we can fast forward master to be at the same place as the origins master. So what I mean by that is if I check out the master branch right now, our color is red, it's centered, it's got a font size of 16. It doesn't have that font size of 32, it's not green, and the text isn't on the left. Okay, so that's the main difference. I can fast forward this, which is gonna make it now. It's gonna apply the changes of this merge request to our local code. So if I fast forward, we'll see that it's now centered left. The font size is 32 and this is green. And why this is useful is that if I ever need to go back, I can say, hey, you know what? Let me go back to this text size. I want it to be bigger than that. Yes, I want to check out this specific commit, but I don't want to see it move to the left. So I can look at this, I can say, you know what? I want this to actually be 64, like that. And now I can look at this. I can see if I like it or not. Maybe I want it to be smaller than that or a different size. And I can say, okay, you know what? I actually like the way this looks. So then I can go here. There's a change that's been made. And I can't make a commit of this because I'm not on a branch right now. So I need to create a branch from this. And this will just be like font size, branch, create and checkout. And then I'm going to do a commit of this and I'd be like, bumped font to 64, commit. And you can see here that it's at a different place. And if I push it and try to merge it, there's going to be a conflict. Okay, so I might push this. All right, there we go. It's pushed. I can look at it over here. I can go back to my code. I can go to my branches. And I can see whether or not this has a conflict. If I do a pull request, let's see if there's a conflict. Checking mergeability. Yes, it can be merged. So it's cool. It's going to replace the 32 with the 64. All right, so this is an example of somebody doing the work on a separate branch. And they said, you know what, let's make it 64. Jason over there or, you know, Michelle or whatever, they handled that particular change. So they're going to make that font size change. So create pull request. Checking for ability to merge. There's no conflicts. Merge pull request. Confirm merge. Delete branch. Okay, cool. So now we can fetch from here. Fetch and prune. And there we go. We can see that our origin master contains those two things. So we've got the merge one here where we have the font is 32. It's on the left side of the screen. And now here's where it's 64 and whatnot. So if we check this out, if we switch to the master, check out master. If we check out master, our font size is 32. Go back to fork. Go to origin master. And then we're on master. So we want to fast forward to what the origin is. And now we can see it's 64 like that. And we have all of this development history. Okay. And that's the most important part is the fact that like there's a record of all the code that we wrote. That's the most important thing. Okay, so this wraps up our tutorial of basically getting set up with the development environment and getting familiar with using Git in a workflow context. Now, just as an aside, you're never really going to do single small changes like I just changed the font size from 32 to 64. That's you're going to do more work than that when you work on your code and when you push your changes and stuff. But you always kind of want to limit the scope of that stuff, but it's important to know that that's basically what that's basically the workflow process. Okay. So I'm going to close Fork. I'm going to close Visual Studio. I'm going to close this, and I'm just going to do a quick overview. Basically, we started with installing Visual Studio. Then we installed Git Bash so we could create stuff via the command line and whatnot. And then we cloned the JUCE framework. That's what we had going on over here. We cloned this. We built ProJucer, which was inside extras. ProJucer builds Visual Studio 2019 down here in the debug in the app. That's what this was down here. All this stuff. We built ProJucer. After we built it, we ran it, and we were able to create our Hello World project. Then we built our, we edited our Hello World project in Visual Studio and made some text changes to it. And then we backed up those text changes via making commits and pushing those commits to a remote repository in the cloud. And we have our history right here of those changes that we made. And it's pretty easy to go through the commits and like make changes to them. And yeah. So here's an example of where you can see I did a commit via the, here's a commit that was, I performed it on GitHub, and you can see it's from Matt Cat Music, which is my GitHub username, versus the name that I specified here. When I set up one of these tools, it was either Git Bash or Xcode or one of the things. So yeah, that basically wraps up this tutorial for getting you set up with a working development environment on a brand new fresh install of Windows 10. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Again, if you want to learn more about this stuff, you can check out my course, Programming for Musicians, C++ for Musicians, which is going to basically explain all the code that we saw over here. It's going to kind of basically get you up and running with understanding how this stuff is. All this stuff, just it's going to give you the knowledge so you can get through this code and understand what exactly is going on. And if you start working on audio plugins and stuff, it's going to teach you how to be able to get through all of the problems that come with that stuff and whatnot. All right, so thanks again for watching. I will see you in the next video. Deuces.